There are three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. This is Chloe Ayling, a 27-year-old English supermodel who was kidnapped at the age of 20 and held at ransom in a farmhouse for 300,000 euros. Or at least, that was her story. When she first explained it to the press, many people found it extremely unbelievable and began digging deeper, trying to find any inconsistencies within her narrative. They thought the story seemed too much like a movie, unlike anything that could happen in real life. But as they uncovered more facts and evidence, the story seemed to just get more and more confusing. That's why in today's video, I'm going to be explaining Chloe's side of the story and the evidence that supports it, as well as looking at some other possible explanations that suggest it was fabricated entirely. At the end of the day, it's up to you which side you want to believe, so grab your popcorn, listen carefully, and let's get started. In 2017, Chloe Ayling was 20 years old, employed as a model by Phil Green's Supermodeling agency, an agency known for having extremely relaxed standards, having sent their models out to pretty much any type of job they could get. It didn't matter if you needed a model for a high-end shoot or to test out a hyper-realistic fish head mask that you just bought from Amazon. Phil Green did it all, for a price. Now, Chloe had only been there for a couple of months before brands began requesting her by name, a feat that typically took years to accomplish. By March of that year, she managed to gain over 150,000 followers on her Instagram by posting every single day, earning over £50,000 a year just from various photo shoots. However, as we all know, having your life broadcasted relentlessly online typically comes with a price. When you chronically post online, everyone that follows you, including the deranged scum of society, knows everything about you. In March, Phil received an email from an Italian photographer going by the name Andre Lazio. Despite the email's harmless nature, Phil was immediately suspicious, having worked with professionals all across the area and never hearing of such a name. However, upon Googling the name, he discovered that there was indeed a photographer named Andre Lazio, finding a portfolio, a professional-looking website, and a studio that the photographer used. So having decided that nothing was amiss, Phil decided to begin negotiations with Andre. Andre apparently wanted Chloe for a motorcycle shoot in Paris the following month. He was also adamant that the model had to be Chloe and was willing to pay £900 up front to ensure she would be the one coming to Paris. So, the day before the shoot, Chloe hopped on a plane to Paris. However, the shoot would never come to be. On the day of the shoot, the photographer called and told Phil that his studio had been ransacked and that the shoot was called off. According to Phil, he sounded extremely apologetic and embarrassed, assuring Phil that this wasn't like him and hoped they could still work together on projects in the future. He even went out of his way to meet Chloe at her hotel in order to pay her back for her expenses that she had incurred throughout the day, an action he took to show his professionalism. Phil, not knowing any better, accepted the man's apology, and when Andre rescheduled the shoot at his new studio in Milan, Phil thought nothing of it and gladly accepted his terms. On July 10th, Chloe arrived at Hotel Gali, excited and ready for the day to come. However, for Chloe, the shoot would never see the light of day, as on July 11th, she vanished without a trace. The first alarm bell was raised by Chloe's mother, who called Phil after not hearing from her daughter all day. Chloe had made it a habit to call and text her mother as often as possible, so when she didn't respond, Chloe's mother knew something was off. Phil attempted to calm her down, informing her that everything would be fine. Andre seemed extremely professional, and Phil trusted him with her daughter. However, just to be sure, after talking with Chloe's mom, he decided to reach out to Chloe in order to make sure everything was going smoothly. When he called, instead of picking up, Chloe's phone went to voicemail, an extremely unusual occurrence for Chloe given how serious she took her modeling profession. He left her a voice message telling her to call him back as soon as possible, and followed up with a text just to be sure. Time went on and on throughout the day with Chloe not responding, and Andre grew more and more worried as she was one of his best clients. She was reliable, professional, and always on her phone, making her response time extremely out of the ordinary. However, it had still only been a day. Maybe her phone was still on airplane mode from the flight or something, and Phil had scheduled her a flight back to England after the shoot, so he was hoping she would be on it when the time came. He called the airport when the time did come, hoping that they would confirm Chloe's presence on the plane, but when he did, he was met with terrible news. Chloe hadn't gotten on the plane, and they had left without her. At this point, Phil began to feel uneasy, however, he wasn't in full panic mode yet. He still knew the photographer, had a picture of him, had the address of where they were going to be, and even knew about the events they had planned throughout the day. There was no way that Chloe wasn't going to be found. The very next day, however, at 10 a.m., Phil checked his email and found a message waiting in his inbox. A ransom email. The email read, "We've got Chloe Ayling. We are Black Death Group. It is of supreme interest that you raise money. You should contact Dave Reed, Paul Baxendale Walker, and Rory McCarthy, or she will be sold at auction on Sunday and handed to the Russian mafia. We require you to come up with an offer by Sunday, or she will be placed for auction." Now, all the men in the ransom note seemed random. However, upon closer inspection, it seemed as though Chloe was on good terms with all of them, and they all happened to be wealthy businessmen Chloe had engaged with previously. Upon receiving the email, Phil contacted both Chloe's mother and the UK consulate in Milan. He gave them all the information he had, the emails he had received from Andre, the addresses, the photos, everything. Upon arriving at Andre's address mentioned in his emails, the Italian police found nothing there. The address was fake, and Andre was able to add more legitimacy by placing it on Google despite its non-existence. There was a similar story when the police investigated the fake studio. However, they also discovered some of Chloe's personal belongings strung about the place, appearing as though some sort of struggle had taken place. To the police, it was obvious what had happened. Chloe had arrived at the fake address, ready for the photo shoot, and was attacked. No one could know where she was now. While all of this was going on, The Sun, a British newspaper, received a tip, written in broken English, about the kidnapping. It read, "Did you know Chloe Ayling had been kidnapped in Italy and is now for sale by Russian mafia? See attachment. It will be fucking hot, mate." Attached to the email was a screenshot of a page that was allegedly listed on the dark web. I'm not going to show you the page or tell you exactly what was on it, but it basically consisted of a page where you could hire people to kidnap specific women and deliver them to you. Some fucked up stuff. Underneath this description, some rules were stated about the kidnappings. For example, they wouldn't kidnap any women who happen to have young children. The page also contained a description of Chloe, including her name, nationality, where she was kidnapped, and measurements of her body. The starting bid began at $300,000 and was set to take place on July 16, 2017. Shortly after the police found Chloe's belongings, another email was sent to both the police and Phil, containing several images. The images depicted a drugged and seemingly unresponsive Chloe with a piece of paper on her chest. The paper included an image that is related to the Black Death Group, a criminal organization based on the dark web. After the images were shown to the public, the story gained international attention, with people becoming horrified after seeing how an extremely successful professional model could be abducted with the snap of a finger. For 6 days, the entire world searched for Chloe, fearing that the worst had happened. But on July 17th, Chloe would walk into the Milan consulate along with her kidnapper, completely unharmed. This led the world to question what had happened to her. Real quick though, before I tell you what happened, I noticed that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. It's free, helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Alright, back to it. Okay, now that you're caught up on Chloe's story, let's take a look at the aftermath, as well as Chloe's responses to people accusing her of faking the entire thing. So yeah, Chloe and her kidnapper, apparently a high-ranking member of an elite dark web criminal group, walk into the police station hand in hand, ready to turn themselves in. Sounds pretty unlikely to me. Chloe reported to the police that when she had arrived to what she thought was the photo shoot, she was ambushed. After being drugged, she was transported in a vehicle for an unknown amount of time, eventually arriving at a small house where she was removed from the vehicle and placed inside one of the rooms, handcuffed to a dresser. It was there where she met her captors. The man claiming to be Andre Lazio, the photographer, was in fact Lucas Herba, the leader of the Black Death Group. He told her that he had been watching her for weeks and that their ultimate plan was to sell her on the black market. She was also told that she had until the end of the week to pay the $300,000. However, she mentioned her family couldn't afford it, hence the 3 wealthy businessmen mentioned in the email sent to Phil. However, there was one thing that the kidnappers hadn't accounted for. Chloe was a mother. 2 years ago, Chloe had given birth to a son, and according to the Black Death Group's guidelines about abductions, they did not sell girls who are, quote, terminally ill, have STDs, or are young mothers. For some strange reason, this international dark web crime syndicate, who had no issue with the business of slavery, drew a line at trafficking women who are close to death and have children. Weird as fuck. Chloe pleaded with her captors to let her go, telling them that she needed to go back and see her son. Upon hearing that she had a child, her captors were shocked. During the weeks and months that they had been studying her, they failed to figure out that she did indeed have a son. Now personally, I find this hard to believe. Chloe had multiple Instagram posts depicting her and her child, and if I were in a dark web crime group, there's no way I would have missed that massive of a fact. much less if it was part of the abduction guidelines. This part of her story began leading people down the path of skepticism, and they began looking for other pieces of evidence to support their theories. As Chloe's captors decided what to do with her, she began to spend lots of time alone with Lucas, the leader of the Black Death group, who would keep watch over her. She began striking up conversations with him, attempting to quote-unquote get him to fall in love with her in order to possibly help save her from the situation she was in. He apparently ended up falling for it, and according to Chloe's reports to the police and several news organizations, the leader of the Black Death group asked her if they could be intimate. Let's run that back real quick. The leader of an international sex trafficking organization with the sole purpose of kidnapping and later selling women to people who would do unspeakable things to them asked Chloe for consent. There's just no shot. Anyways, Chloe said she would, but only if she was set free. This didn't run with Lucas. However, at this point, he was in too deep. He began giving Chloe chocolates and clothes, as well as allowing her to walk around the house without being cuffed to anything. However, Chloe mentioned that she was still too afraid to try and escape, as she feared that she would be killed if she did. A couple days passed, and this is where the story starts to go to shit. Chloe offered Lucas a deal. If he took her to the consulate and released her, she wouldn't snitch on him and would personally pay the ransom, and they could be together forever and ever. Lucas, blinded by love, obliged. Okay, stop. This is too far. There's no way Lucas, a sex trafficking criminal mastermind, would ever agree to something like that. I just find it so hard to believe. And apparently a lot of other people felt the same way. How had these two men who had apparently kidnapped and trafficked hundreds of women overlooked the fact that Chloe had a son? What kind of sex trafficking organization has a list of moral guidelines? Why had the captors immediately emailed offering her to be brought back by her agent? None of it made sense, but the story would only get more and more confusing. After Chloe was returned to the police, she went through various tests and interviews as the police attempted to get to the bottom of what had happened to her. Chloe was initially examined by doctors, where they found something strange. Despite being kidnapped and living through such a traumatic experience, Chloe was completely unharmed. No drugs were found to have been in her system, and the only things that supported her story was a small needle mark on her arm and traces of ketamine found in her hair. However, there was no way to see if or when the drug had entered her system, meaning it was possible she had taken ketamine recreationally before the attack. She had no injuries, no bruises, no cuts, nothing. Anyways, after being held for about 4 weeks, she was finally allowed to return to the UK, where she held a press conference in front of her mother's home. Chloe had set up the press conference herself, saying that she wanted to speak out on her experience and terrifying ordeal. However, this only served to confuse the public more. As you can see from the footage, Chloe appeared pretty normal and at some points even pleased with the press she was receiving. Now don't get me wrong, people respond to trauma differently, but her response was so unusual, people began to feel as though something were off about her entire story. This theory was seemingly confirmed when CCTV footage was released depicting Chloe going on dates with her alleged kidnapper, something she had originally not told the cops about. In her original statement, she claimed that she was forced to stay indoors, but this was seemingly not true. Multiple witnesses observed her and Lucas out and about, laughing without a care in the world. It was also revealed that Chloe had been Facebook friends with Lucas years before the kidnapping, although there was no evidence the two had actually talked. Another thing I find extremely interesting is that they both arrived at the consulate a few hours earlier than it opened. Instead of leaving his victim on the doorstep and making a grand escape, Lucas opted to go to a nearby cafe with Chloe, and they ate breakfast together. Another thing that Phil Green mentioned later in the investigation is that there was more to the email than what he had given to the police beforehand. The kidnappers wrote in a line underneath, quote, "I am sure that this experience properly exposed to the media will kickstart her career and that she will be very comfortable giving the money back." What kind of criminal gives professional marketing tips to the agency of the person they are attempting to kidnap? The majority of people didn't believe that Chloe had been kidnapped and instead thought that the entire stunt was pulled simply in order for her to gain more popularity and fame, thus furthering her career. And to be honest, it seemed to work to a certain extent, as she appeared on the show Big Brother in 2018. However, when Michael Herba, Lucas's brother, was arrested, the public's opinions were validated as he exposed that Chloe had planned out the fake kidnapping herself, aiming to get more press and attention. As for the Black Death Group, it was investigated by Interpol, where they determined that it may or may not actually exist, as many of the postings on the dark web were fake. At the end of the day, Chloe's reputation was somewhat tarnished. However, she is still active online today, having over 200,000 Instagram followers. I don't really know what the final verdict of this story is, to be honest. The brothers were convicted and sentenced, but Chloe was apparently behind the whole thing and has been left to her own devices. Let me know what you think about the whole situation in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. It's free and helps me out a lot. As always, it's been me, Kel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.